Hi, everyone. Welcome to one of our video sessions on insights that we give to adopting families. This one, we're going to talk today about something that we hear about constantly and something that I think is near and dear to our hearts in terms of why we built the platform that we did. But today we're going to be talking about how to keep families safe from scams and or from unethical practices. So I'm Erin Quick, CEO and founder of PairTree, and I'm joined today by the lovely Jess Nelson.
Thank you. My name's Jess. I am the community manager here at PairTree, and I'm also a two-time birth mom.
And she is also kind of the person that is in charge of kind of managing our scam or fraud practices here at PairTree. And so she's the perfect person to be talking to about this. So today we're going to focus on two major areas, the areas that we hear the most about when we're talking about scams or fraud or unethical practices. So one is going to focus on adoption professionals, some of the practices that that adoption professionals use that are horribly unethical, and talk about why that matters. And then the other one is the one that's probably most thought about when you hear about scams, and those are people that are posing as expectant moms and or birth moms to get time, money, or attention out of adopting families. So let's start with adoption professionals, Jess.
Yeah.
And let's just run through kind of the list of what are the things, if you're an adopting family, what are the major red flags to look for in terms of unethical practices when it comes to adoption professionals?
Great question, and truthfully, one of my favorite things to talk about. Probably the biggest red flag that I look for as a birth mom and as an adoption professional is transporting expectant moms, flying expectant moms to a different state to deliver. Oftentimes it's to a more adoption-friendly state, meaning they have better laws that favor adopting families as opposed to birth parents, meaning she can sign her relinquishment papers faster, often in 24 hours, and they can finalize the adoption quicker. And you'll see these agencies that advertise things like birth parent housing, and it on paper or on a website, it sounds like such a great thing. Like, this agency offers birth parent housing. That's amazing. But it's not. It's oftentimes a terrible apartment, a house with 20 women in it and 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms.
What they leave is as soon as they give birth.
Exactly. About 48 hours after they give birth, they're sent back to where they came from. And that's a coercive tactic to rip these women away from their home and their support system and other kids and put them in a new place in housing, where they're basically forced to follow through with their adoption plan. Otherwise, they have to take a bus home to wherever they came from.
Yeah. And again, like, this is like they're ripped away from their supportive networks in their most vulnerable time. So it's incredibly predatory. What about kind of fee structures? What are some of the things that we see in terms of fee structures on the adoption professional side?
Gosh, one of the biggest red flags to look for is if they charge a different fee for different races. There are some agencies that charge more money for a Caucasian baby with no drug or alcohol exposure, and they charge a lot less for African American or mixed race babies or babies that have drug or alcohol exposure. And so when you're looking at agencies to work with, or if you're working with a consultant or something, an agency that you might see an opportunity from, look at their fee structure, because if they're charging different fees for placements based on race or gender or drug or alcohol exposure, run the other direction.
What about paying expectant moms?
Yes. So a lot of adopting families don't know that birth parent expenses are, 1, regulated, and 2, they differ from state to state. Almost every state has different laws. And so if you're working with an agency or an attorney that doesn't have a cap on birth parent expenses, or they offer cash, or they offer a blank check, that's not only oftentimes illegal, but it's highly unethical, because if you're offering a woman who's in a crisis situation, a $10,000 check to make an adoption plan and follow through with it, chances are she's going to, and she's not going to choose adoption for the right reasons. She's going to choose adoption because you're paying her.
And the ramifications of that are down the road. She's going to have regret. And
Yep.
Truth be told, like, there's no guarantee that she goes through with that adoption.
Exactly.
So the amount of times that she might change her mind after she's been paid,
Yep.
and or like to be saying like, once you give birth, then you get the money, like highly illegal.
Yep.
And so it's, and but the bigger reason is just from an ethical standpoint. Open adoption is now the norm. And so you and the birth family will work together in service to the child in some capacity. And that's a relationship that will be near and dear to your heart, speaking from the adopting family standpoint. And you want that relationship to be completely unbiased and without any kind of like strange secrets, that when your child is 10 years old and says, what are the circumstances around my adoption, Mom? You don't want to say like, well, your birth mom was in a crisis situation and she received $10,000 to place you with us.
Yep.
That's like, it's just, you don't even have that in your heart, on your mind. That should not ever be enter the situation at any point.
Exactly. You want to make sure that you're working with professionals that are going to help you write an adoption story that you aren't ashamed to tell one day, and that you aren't ashamed or nervous to answer some of these questions that are going to come up at least one day.
They're going to come up a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. And in order to raise a child that is happy and healthy, you need to be able to answer those questions openly and honestly.
Yep.
And the only way to do that is to make sure that everything about the adoption is completely above bar.
Because even if you don't answer those questions openly and honestly, that kiddo's birth parents, whether they know them now or not, they probably will. And that's going to make for a really uncomfortable conversation later on if you and birth parents are telling a different story.
2 more questions. What about how certain adoption professionals recruit moms and or incentivize moms, like place again or refer a friend?
Yes, both of those are common practices in adoption. I worked in a state where there was a known adoption attorney who kind of had a system, a referral network in place with jail, homeless shelters, and drug and alcohol rehabs, where basically if they had a mom who was pregnant, even if she hadn't said anything about adoption, they would call this attorney and he would come talk to them, offer them a $5,000 check. And when you're in jail or in rehab, $5,000 is a lot of money. And so when you're
very, very predatory.
Yeah, it's predatory, it's coercive, it's unethical, it's illegal. But it's a common practice, and there's agencies across the US that offer referral cards, a $500 Visa gift card. If you have a friend who's pregnant, and convince them to come and work with this agency or facilitator, or send them to this consultant. And often there's a bonus if you are a birth mom and are pregnant again and considering adoption. Oftentimes there are agencies that will give you an incentive for coming back and placing again. So an added cash or check in addition to the expenses that you could normally receive.
Yeah. And I think it's worth mentioning, because I think any adopting family that listens to this, because I remember being in this situation where I was like, I want a baby. I had tunnel vision. And so it's worth, like, yes, some of these practices may put a baby in your home faster. But again, you have to approach adoption with long-term thinking, because short-term, yes, there may be a child in your home faster. But if that child is placed in your home under very predatory or coercive circumstances, the chance that your child will struggle with identity issues down the road are high. In order to be making sure that we are helping raise happy and healthy children, we have to make sure that the adoptions are done ethically, period.
Yep. Yep.
Last one, Jess, what about post-placement?
As a birth mom myself, and someone who did not receive post-placement care after my first placement and received it after the second, I think there's nothing more important for expectant moms, with the exception of separate legal representation, but we can talk about that another day. But making sure that they have access to post-placement support, and not post-placement support for the first 6 months after placement, because that's not when we need it. We need post-placement support a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And so if you're working with an attorney and they don't offer post-placement support, because it is hard for attorneys to have the ability to offer post-placement support, but make sure that they're referring those women, or they have a partnership with an organization that provides post-placement support. And even if they don't offer it, make sure that they are pointing women in the direction to get it. Because we see so many pitfalls of not having access to post-placement support. And that's another thing that is going to come up one day with your adoptees. They're going to have questions, and if you can answer all of their questions and make sure that you did everything possible to support their birth family, both pre and post placement, you're going to have a healthier relationship with them. They're going to have a healthier journey, a healthier story, and it's going to be a better relationship and situation for everybody.
Thanks, Jess. Okay, we're going to end it for now, and we're going to start part 2 shortly. For part 2, we're going to talk about how to avoid scams, fraudulent people posing as expectant moms to get time, money, attention out of adopting families. Stay tuned.
Yes.